We're starting. Yes. Sorry, I should have said that. Yes.
Oh, good.
You got some new books behind you from the last time I interviewed you
I
like this.
I do. Well, we moved over the summer, and I took the advantage of the break to finally rearrange all of the bookshelf. So
All right.
we're now.
Uh, welcome everybody. This is Perry Bacon, and this is the New Republic show right now. I'm joined by Leah Greenberg. She's the co-executive director of Indivisible, which has organized all these important rallies and mobilizations against administration, both from 2017 to 2020, also last year. So, Leah, great to see you. Welcome.
Great to be here.
So I want to talk to you about what happened over the weekend in terms of, and just talk about, first of all, like, I think I've talked to some political scientists and scholars, but just like from why should Americans be concerned that the U.S. government grabbed the leader of a foreign nation without congressional authorization over the weekend? Like, why, just in a layman's terms, why is this bad? Maduro is not a good person. He lost an election but stayed in power. So why should we be concerned about this?
Well, look, I think if the last couple of decades have taught us anything, it is that ill-conceived, aggressive foreign policy interventions into places that we are fully unprepared to be involved in have enormously horrifying consequences, both for the places that where we're intervening and its people, and for the American people, right? Like, we have been in multiple decades of these endless wars that are wars of choice that have been activated by American governments with no real sense of what they're getting into. And this is perhaps the most ill-conceived, most illegal, most immoral in recent history. This is just an absolutely wild, completely, fundamentally crazy decision to go in and try to execute kind of a gunboat diplomacy style attack on Venezuela in a period when, Americans are crying out for us to address challenges at home. This is, what I would say is that it is both we should all have learned important lessons about what it means to destabilize another country or region without a plan. And also, this is just another demonstration of the fact that Donald Trump does not consider himself constrained by any domestic or foreign law and will simply put his craziest ideas into action without taking seriously the consequences for anyone.
Use the phrase "most illegal." Right? Explain why you, because this
Well,
illegal is on a
yeah, that
continuum,
one
I
may
guess.
be. Let me walk that one back. But it is a wildly illegal series of events. Now, I'm not sure that's. I think that is important. I think that should be part of an ongoing process of investigation and examination of exactly what happened, what decisions were made, who was responsible, and also, I think that it's possible sometimes for us as Democrats to go down this rabbit hole where we're talking about kind of the constitutional,
Right.
the authorities, and the problem is it is a big problem that Congress was not consulted before Donald
Right.
Trump decided to go to war. It's also a big problem that this is a crazy, terrible idea, right?
Yes.
Like, Congress, had they been consulted, should have said no. Because
And I'm guessing these things are tied, and that this is so radical and so crazy. If Congress had been asked, it never would have happened. Right?
one would certainly hope.
Yes, one would hope. Right.
If you think about the congressional history here, right, we got very, very close to a war powers resolution on the attacks on the ongoing series of attacks on fishermen boats.
Right.
And, like literally within, I think, 2 votes of the last resolution coming up. And so what we know is that Congress is quite skeptical of this kind of, aggressive foreign policy intervention movement or moment. Um, we're going to have some coming moments in the next week to test that and to see what kind of overall, pushback we can harness as we have war power resolutions come up, hopefully. But it's really clear that you would not get an affirmative go-ahead from this
Right.
Congress.
Talking about what do you want Democrats in Congress and then Democrats in America to do about what should their reaction be? Both groups.
Well, look, I think fundamentally, we know this administration's MO. They do something awful. They see what kind of blowback they get. And if they're able to get away with it, then they do more and they escalate, right? And so I think it's very important that right now we are collectively outraged, in action, in motion, and creating as much backlash as possible in reaction to what has happened in order to avert future and further escalations and interventions, right? We are seeing Trump, as of the last couple of days, rattling his saber at Cuba and at Mexico and at Greenland. It
Right.
is extraordinarily important that his interpretation and his, cronies' interpretation of what happens here is not, I took this aggressive action, I got away with it, I should try doing that again and again and again. And that means, a combination of popular backlash. That means everyone continuing to mobilize pressure on their own elected representatives, Republicans or Democrats. I would say the median Democratic member this time has actually been pretty forward leaning, certainly more forward leaning than Democratic leadership has been on this. But you have folks who are nobody's idea of like a flaming progressive who are out very clear that they think this is a terrible and illegal series of developments. We need to continue to stoke that energy within the Democratic Party. We also just need to make sure that Republicans are getting some heat on it. Now, there is the potential for a war powers resolution that would come up in, these are privilege resolutions, which means that the leadership can't stop them from coming to the floor within certain parameters. And so there's an opportunity for a vote on constraining the use of force in both the Senate and the House one likely to come up relatively quickly. And so there's going to be an opportunity for an actual vote on
Okay.
the, on what is happening here.
What would
that
the
we
vote? What would the? I don't actually. I'm an expert on the War Powers Act. So, what would the actual vote policy? What would actually policy be? Do you know much about?
I can't give you the specifics of each one, but they're both aimed, essentially at preventing, or they would be aimed ostensibly at preventing further non-defensive military operations and some
Okay.
amount of like ongoing effort to constrain the independent action of the executive. Now, obviously, we're in uncharted territory in terms of how willing this executive is to simply like disregard laws, but we also do see some ongoing evidence that when they are formally, constrained, rebuked, et cetera, they sometimes pull back, right? Thinking about, for example, a quieter defeat that they had over the last month, which is pulling the National Guard out of blue
Right.
cities following the Supreme Court's ruling that that is in fact not a power he has.
You said like people who are not anyone's idea of a progressive. I'll just name. I thought Ruben Gallego. There were a lot of members who I don't think of as being very left wing who said very critical things. You said there's a gap between the members and leadership. Explain that a little bit. I know Jeffrey's statement led with the Maduro's a bad person. I think it got decent after that. But so talk about the difference between what the leadership has done and what the members have done in your view.
Yeah, I mean, well, what I would say is if you can explain it to me, then that's great too. I'd welcome it. But I think you've seen notably more caution and hesitation in the framing coming from Minority Leader Jeffries and Schumer than you have coming from a lot of members across the ideological spectrum of the Democratic Party. I think a lot of moderates and particularly folks who've got combat experience, like Senator Gallego, are really clear that getting involved in incredibly ill-conceived, immoral actions leads nowhere good for the people the people of that country, and leads nowhere good for American troops. And so they're responding with a lot more clarity in this moment. I think Democratic leadership is, in many ways and often, we find is that they are cautious. They are not guided by a core set of principles that allow you to simply and clearly react and say, "No, absolutely not another Iraq, not on our watch." And it's our job to generate that pressure to get them there.
Last thing, and this is a different subject, is you all have announced you're going to have a big Indivisible is going to have one of the biggest primary campaigns they've ever had this year. Talk about what are you talking about? Is not in general probably challenging existing members. It's more open primaries. Or talk about what you're thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're working with our folks around the country on this right now because fundamentally, Indivisible is a nationwide movement. It is led by folks all over the country on their home turf. And so it is in every congressional district, in every state. We're in the middle of working directly with folks on where they are going in on primaries and where we can, as National Indivisible, provide additional support. And our anticipation is it is going to be a combination of places where we've got indivisible groups who are going in for a candidate in an open primary, or where indivisible groups are backing a candidate who's a challenger to an existing Democrat who has not gotten with the program. It's going to be some combination of those two. We're going to be Obviously, there's like way more races than any one
Right.
organization can coherently support, but we're going to be coming in behind a bunch of our groups in key pivotal places where we think we can really make a difference in the direction of the Democratic Party.
So I was looking online at your principles. I think one of them is Senate candidates should commit to not endorsing Schumer for majority leader again. Are there any other sort of civic principles for House or Senate candidates?
Yeah, look, look, fundamentally, we're looking for fighters, right? We want to see people who understand this is an emergency, who understand that it requires using all the tools in the toolbox. We're going to take a different approach to business as usual. That includes being willing to embrace structural reforms like reforming the Supreme Court. It includes your relationship with money in politics, right? Not taking money from the funders of fascism, not taking money from crypto or APAC. It includes, a host of things. And we're not trying to be super prescriptive. This is not
Yes.
like 40
Right.
different questionnaire questions and, like intense. I'm a former policy staffer myself, and, filling out those questionnaires for the different interest groups was like very traumatic because you're researching things you certainly don't know enough about to comment on. And so we're not trying to get to that level of detail. We want to create an overall flexible set of framing and principles that folks are capable of applying wherever they are, and that give us some cohesion across the country about what does it mean to be a democratic fighter.
But it's also something you've been talking about since the Trump won is like you've been saying the divide in the party is not necessarily left or right, but between fighting or left and center. I should say. It's not necessarily progressive, moderate, although there's an element of that. It's more the who's a fighter, who sees the threat for what it is versus who's so in some ways, like you're looking for some fighters a little harder to define than who's for Medicare for all, who's for a wealth tax, right?
That's right. That's right. And look, I think it's a little bit of I think of it as an X and Y spectrum, right? Like how far to the center versus the left are you? And then how much do you think we're in an emergency or not, right? And frankly, like there tends to be some alignment
Sure.
between people who are more to the left and more to the emergency quadrant, but it's not everyone and it's not always, right? Like we've seen Chris Murphy, who would be nobody's, named progressive lead champion, emerge this year as a very important leader in the "This is an emergency" caucus. And so I think we've
I
got
was going to say Van Hollen is actually even more sort of known for being kind of mild mannered, but as I don't know what he is in the sort of center versus left. I think he's in a normal. His policy views are fairly normal, but I think he's been much more engaged in a certain way.
Yeah, I think you've seen some people who got a really clear moral center, who've got a willingness to stand up and be counted, and who are properly alarmed and horrified by what's happening, who've emerged as leaders who maybe weren't, who weren't the center of attention before, like Van Hollen.
Last thing, I guess Mayor Mondani called Trump on Saturday and registered his objections. What do you think about that? That was just sort of I'm not sure how many members of Congress have the president's access to the actually. What did you make of it? I thought it was a good first sign that he's engaged, though, right?
I mean, look, there that is a fascinating relationship, right? Obviously, not what I think a lot of us were expecting when Mayor Mamdani was elected. We were expecting much more of a aggressive Trump onslaught on New York. Um, Fundamentally, I think this is the kind of blowback that you want Trump to experience from a lot
Hmm.
of different
Okay.
spaces and unexpected sources, where his mental frames are so simple. He's like, special forces are cool, take the oil, that's great, like
Right.
the to the extent that he experiences this as a pull boost or an easy win, he's more likely to pursue more of these hits. To the extent that he perceives this as
Okay.
a lot of, like a poll drag, a big problem for him because suddenly there's a bunch of extra investigations and votes, and he's having to answer questions about this for the next 2 months, and it's just like not something that he wants more of. We're more likely to be able to constrain the next offensive action.
So how we react to these next few days matters, and how outraged we all sound really matters.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm always obligated to say, call your members of Congress. There's active legislation here that they will be called to vote on relatively soon on the war powers resolutions. We've got to make sure that there's a resounding rebuke of what Trump has done here.
All right. Leah, great to see you. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. Good to see you.